Good afternoon, everyone, and hello, Kader.
Hello.
It's nice to share this space with you again.
Thank you.
We have many entwined conversations over the years. You're based in Berlin and Paris, you have roots in Algeria, but you really have spent a lot of time all over the world. And I know, I always describe you as an artist, philosopher, you're also a curator, you're just someone who brings people together, but I know you like to describe yourself also as a researcher. And I think a lot of your works are really deeply ingrained with that practice, and from the film work to the installations to the sculptures to the paintings. And our conversations in Berlin have been a lot about buildings, architecture, repair, and the history and how that has been ingrained in the history of a city. And now I'm very pleased being here at the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi that actually we have a beautiful work by yours, and our work will be continue to do that. And I think what I would like to start with was also knowing that you brought some pictures of your works to say that I feel your thinking and the research you're doing is really this field of connections, of relations, and we talk often about how Glissant thinks about these knots and relations, and I feel your works are like the trees who kind of grow out of these kind of different connections and relations you're building, and they have very different forms. And when we think about time, and you think about time, I mean, repair and time, of course, are very connected, but I think it's also how you negotiate time in your works. And I think it would be nice to start with, we just have here this work of yours, Oil and Sugar, and maybe think with you a bit how these works for you relate to your current thinking about the aspect of time.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for being here, and thanks for inviting me too. I would say that the question of time, particularly from a position from where each human subject is expressing itself or herself or themselves, has been spoken a lot in all the conferences, the amazing moment we've been living. But as far as I'm concerned, I have to say that I always got skeptical about the notion of time as not only a tangible existence, but even as a space where we do project ourselves constantly into the past or the future, but never the present. And we'll see later in this conversation how this has a significant political role as well today, the present. But as far as I'm concerned, caring about the present is something that is also very, very, Sisyphean, thinking about the myth of Sisyphus, this hero from the Greece antiquity who was condemned to push the rocks on top of the mountains, and constantly the rocks was falling in. I think as soon as you want to think present, you're not anymore in the present. So basically, time does not exist. It's a phenomenon that we can talk about. It's flexible, but we cannot ontologically think times. Let me give you an interesting example, because we're here to talk about art. I really think that in the end of the day, the humanity has been inventing constantly machines to speed up, what we call the techne. But if there's probably one machine that slows down time, is art. And artwork create this slowing down moment of time in which each subject, the viewers, the listener, the reader, and of course including all art, all forms of creation, is actually immersed in another temporality, slower. Why, as an artist, I appreciate this? Because I think that art has At some point, art is the extension of a human being capacity to dream. Another way of of the flexibility of time, of how much we can really create different temporalities in which we live, is our dreams. Remember that, I don't know where I read that, but I remember that dream of an aristocrat during the French Revolution. Someone was dreaming he was an aristocrat during the French Revolution. He has been arrested by the rebels, and then he has been condemned, and then the guillotine fell on his neck, and he woke up. When he woke up, the frame of the bed, when he woke up, the frame of the bed was on his neck. So his unconsciousness has produced all this dramaturgy within a slight, almost impossible time. And I think this is super important. I think we have no idea about what is time, basically. And last but not least, I will finish with this, about this little projectionist that we have in our unconsciousness, and that each night is turning on the cinema of our life, creating a dramaturgy from all memories accumulated during the day, the week, the year, and giving us a movie, sometimes a bad movie, sometimes a fantastic movie. But we are definitely constantly creating, and by this act, by these sort of processes, we actually reinvent time constantly. So time is actually, as far as I'm concerned, does not exist, but we do invent it.
And I think just to go back, dreaming came up now also in panels before, but I think the dreaming also helps us to connect the dead and the living, no? Because in the dreams they come. So there is also this kind of merging of time, or kind of bringing different aspects into this, which I think is in your work is also something you connect. You don't make that difference between who's with us right now, or how are these stories told. So maybe tell us a bit about what's happening on that. I know it's a film.
Yeah, it's actually a film, but talking about the dream, and I was about to talk about how much in our culture, when you wake up, your mother tells you what was your dream last night, and if you have nothing to say, she answers by, I dreamt about your grandmother, she visited me, and then there's a whole. So in our cultures, but I'm sure there are in the rooms many people who can also identify with this, we through the dream, through unconsciousness, the dead are speaking. In our culture, there's a text by Freud who speaks about that too. Here you have a Roman arch, which is next to my village in Algeria, where I also played football here, but I was always fascinated growing up that how much these kids, and my cousins and also the kids I was, and now these boys, were rewriting history by reappropriating this incredible symbol of colonial empire that was the Roman Empire, and also the fact that during the French colonial time, it was strictly forbidden to access to this archaeological site. Playing soccer on this act, in this context, for me, was very close to what we will talk about regarding algorithm later. How much freedom, free time, are these interstitial spaces that do exist in the everyday life that you need to reappropriate and protect. We will see later why. So the almost free will to decide that this site is something else, for me is something that I found very symbolically very strong, and also poetically beautiful, because it's also part of, again, a whole atmosphere of the region, and of different times of the day. Sometimes at the end of the day, when the sunset is happening, you see these kids playing football with these incredible symbols. And needless to say that because of my artistic education, I've always been fascinated by the whole legacy of Roman empires in Italy, in the countryside, and how people during the Middle Age, the peasants, were understanding these sculptures of Jupiter, of Venus, I got from friend historian that they, an interesting anecdote. We did research on them. His name is Serge Gruzinski, and he found out that from text from the Middle Age that the people in Italy were convinced that this god and goddess did existed, but Christ won the war. So there is a kind of, for me, interesting fascination in how much the human subject has the capacity to rewrite its own history. And talking sometimes, about what is public art, what is the experience of art outside, for me, deliberately, is the reinvention of the narrative of what is supposed to be the memory, at least the reappropriation.
So just going back again to this work, I mean, what fascinated you there probably was also that there is this playful connection between a long history, an architecture, and children who just play around knowing what they're playing around. What's exactly, so they are aware of that history, but it kind of becomes just part of their presence, and I think that's a way. And I think maybe we'll wait until sugar and oil comes to readdress that. In your own research, I think it's interesting how, when we talk about time and art needs time, that is something where you really delve into. So this kind of working with others together. I think, you said at the beginning of your work, there's always a drawing. And I understand that also as something to say at the beginning, there is like an idea or a concept, and then you work on it with others. So it's not that each time I meet you, you're reading another book, and you really read it, which I think is, I know many people who don't manage anymore to go through an 800-page book and really annotate and learn from it. So this process of research seems to be very much connected, and also how you engage with time. Yeah, taking the time.
It's also interesting that you refer to collectiveness when you ask this question, because I've been asked for years how different I was in terms of, my interest. Okay, my parents come from Algeria. I grew up in Algeria, and then I grew up in France, and I went, and still now I'm really going back and forth between different fields. I'm fascinated by this. But what took me probably 50 years to understand, it is because we are not one single individual. I think each person in this room is several persons. And if you start to understand this, you can. I really like this terminology that is sometimes used in queer theory. There, I do believe we are there, because, talking about collectiveness, it's not necessarily to claim it. It's also just like I did with La Colonie, to create the space for the community, but it's also to care about those differences that actually compose yourself. And as far as I'm concerned, indeed, I'm fascinated by, let's talk, for instance, about this video, and if we can have it, would be great, the Oil and Sugar Project. The Oil and Sugar Project, it's a cube of sugar, on top of which I poured black oil. I didn't know what will happen. The work, self-created itself. Then I recorded this video. But because we are talking about time today, this notion of unexpected result or an experience, both for the artist and the audience, is definitely something that has to do with different layers of your personality. And to come back on reading and theory, this is also what I'm teaching to my students in Hamburg, Germany, is that it's very important to understand that praxis and theory are important for an artist. The praxis stop, or let's say the theory limits, are the area where the praxis start. And that's why I care so much about know-how, craft works, artifact, this, precious legacy that produces this know-how, this main d'oeuvre, hand work, And on the other hand, when the praxis is not here because there's no inspiration, because we are in front of a white canvas or a white page, it is time to read. It is time to leave a place for thinking. You cannot stay under the cover and cry because the inspiration is not, or go to do. It's interesting to consider theory or even novels as a meditative process. It takes time to get in, but when you're in, it's very, very strong. It would be great to have the video.
The video, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, you can, okay.
And so I know, I mean, you very often, and that will come now, you talk about this is the kind of, for you, really the exemplification of the eternal now, and that this is how you see the time. While we, I think, maybe look at that video, I'd like to go back a bit to the challenge. We said we also gonna discuss today the question of how can we reappropriate the time which is freed up through or by technology, but kind of going a bit back and say, how can we actually make sure that there's time freed up? And when you use that word reappropriation, I know that has a big meaning in your work, and you always, like from very early on when I started to read about your work, reappropriation has something to do with decolonizing and regaining or gaining back. So maybe you could kind of talk a bit about your this idea, of course, that through technology, time should be freed up, but we all know that what happens a lot of the times is that we're just more on our devices. We're just kind of actually we're doing more instead of saying, can we just have the time to be together and have these conversations? And I think what we heard a lot in the panels we had is the importance of taking the time together. And I think especially for creativity, for museums, it's important to take that time. I think rushing is in the way of creating something new, because you oversee things. You want to go to a space where you don't know, but if you rush, you will not be able to do that. I always like that idea of, Arnold von Gennett, the rites of passage, where you actually have to be in this space of the unknown, where you dare to be in the dark, because when you're in that very difficult space where you don't know the next step, you're gonna see something which isn't already, pre-confirmed in your mind. So I'd like to hear a bit. I know your thinking is
I think
quite
particularly because we're here in a cultural summit, we have to understand what means free time. At the beginning of the 19th century, at the dawn of industrial revolution, what Karl Marx has understood with his analyze, the way he has emphasized the proletarian class, is that the delegation to the machine of the energy that was used to produce craft has not only captured the know-how capacity of this subject by repeating the same thing on the assembly line. You lose your knowledge. You lose your capacity to develop your knowledge. But even more important is the fact that, to make a long story short, because we don't have that much of time, I don't want to go across the 19th and 20th century. Some philosophers like Bernard Stiegler has called this deproletarization and destined it as a disappearance of knowledge, of the know-how, I just described it, of the how to live in the 30s with the rise of Hollywood and all the entertaining society. Walter Benjamin wrote on that, and Paul Valéry too. And today we are attending, and that's the point of our meeting, the proletarization of theory, of thinking, because we are interacting constantly with automatons who are like accelerating the speed by not only thinking instead of ourselves, but modifying ourselves. And when we ended up in a space like this, like culture, for me it means a lot. Why? It means a lot because what is the purpose of increasing technology? I think we have rich enough technology to survive. Why are we like constantly producing new means and new things? And okay, if not to liberate time for the humans that we have. But strangely, all of you here knows that the more we have technology, the less time we have. Why? Because the time is colonized. How? It is colonized by technoliberalism and a non-regulated capitalism that is constantly extracting data, behavioral data, so I'm quoting here Shoshana Zuboff, surveillance capitalism, from us. You use the keyboard of your screen, the impulse, the weight of the impulse is actually captured, is analyzed, is stored, you know? There is a huge market of data, and don't worry, I'm not technophobe. I'm not technophobic at all. I'm just against the way that neoliberal capitalism is non-regulated in this process. Why? Because it's transforming free will and public opinion. It's a pharmacon. It's the remedy and the poison. How it transforms it. So let's go back a little bit to dreams. Sigmund Freud explained very well that the desire, what is actually the motor of consumption in a consumer society, the libidinal society, is the link of drives, of pulsions. So we are living in an impulsive capitalism. Through alerts and invisible alerts, stimuli, what we are doing now, all together, that philosophy calls individuation. We are all individuals creating a collective individual. Is actually shortcutted, bypassed, by algorithmic governance that stimulate us at a level of unconsciousness, at a level of drive, to collect data. Because if you want to collect, if you want to harvest, you need to put some seeds, you know? The more we have free time, and the more this free time becomes the area of collecting data. That's why the worst is to use your free time to be on social media, for instance. While you think you are politically engaged, involved, doing the revolution, you're actually just like the slave of a new system, a new neo-colonial digital systems that is actually profiling you in the cloud with all these individuals I was saying before. Because we are not one single person. We are several individuals. And those data that are now, the UPI, the user profiling information algorithm, was invented by Google in 2003. Imagine how much they have improved it today. And it's not, we are just at the beginning. So what I'm advocating, and then we'll come back to art, is that art, because it has this capacity to gather physically as we are today, but also in exhibition, is definitely the space of collective individuation to protect and also to build not only a common ground, but also a kind of exigence, you know, a kind of level of relevance and expectation instead of this zombie pretension that we experiment every day when we're interacting, particularly with, I'm not saying exchanging message, even though sometimes, but particularly when we are like the object. I would finish by these quotes by Jaron Lanier, which is about social media. You don't pay the product because you are the product.
So can we maybe say then that we can reappropriate the free time by creating these spaces you create with La Colonie, kind of bringing people together, giving a platform to really share without a defined outcome? I mean, just say that these are open discussions to negotiate the world around us, the challenges. Is that, I mean, you do that in your work, I think, in different ways. In your own work by, you know, having all these conversations, but also with La Colonie where, you know, it's not, you don't perceive that as a work by yours, but it's really a place, or has been a place in Paris. I mean, maybe you give a bit of a backstory of, you know, that it has been in Paris for many years. Now it's more like
it's nomadic.
Yes, it's a nomadic, but it will find hopefully a place again. But
it
maybe
will.
Tell us a bit how that was conceived and how you still live it.
It will, Stephanie, but also if you may, I would like also to speak about how much I really care about how the art experience, like an exhibition or a performance. The project I just did, for instance, in Al Hula, is in the middle of nowhere. Is putting the viewer as a listener, because it's, to make a long story short, it's an accumulation of blue bottles of glass melted together, from which the neck are like, I mean, exposed to the wind. So when it's windy, the whole sculptures are producing music. I mean, attention has been, I mean, individual and collective attention completely colonized. And I think it's a very rare, I mean, very scarce capacity. That's why we have to protect it. And to protect it, indeed, it's, I mean, needs to elaborate places to meet and to individuate with others. So for me, the art exhibition as a physical experience is something crucial. I'm sorry for those who are giving conferences about museum and Google Glass. I'm like, no. I really think that art is something, I mean, art and discussions. I'm very sensitive to this. I think it's so totally different to be with someone, you know? So at that moment, La Colonie exists. Achille Mbembe invited me to give a conference last week online, so it's going to be on YouTube, etc. Elvira Diongani from Barcelona also. She's super nice to welcome us to continue La Colonie. But definitely there will be one day where we will build a place to exchange, to also to eat couscous together and to drink whatever, you know. La Colonie was a place where the field of emotion was not only about theory and about, I would say, like knowledge, and but also the notion of emotion was openly, oriented to food, to dancing, to performance, to cinema. It was a multi-cultural space, and I think this is also important. That's why I always insist that art should not be, when you talk with artists or young artists, when it's not at the university, I'm always telling them, like, my department, it's called time-based media. And I started my course with classic painting. The time-based media is the experience of the artwork. And then the experience of the artwork is a place where we can definitely first gather with all our differences in the same place, in order to build this collective individual that is so much important, because this is what guarantees the evolution of the society.
And maybe go again, you know, what you say, like the place to be with art. So, I mean, a place like a museum where you on the one hand say the value of spending time, you know, as an individual and without all our kind of different perspectives, and really feel it. I mean, I think I still think of the pandemic and knowing that you can't go into the museums, and then going back and thinking, of course there is also a value of having that digital space together. But I think this really being in front of an artwork and just feeling it with your body is a very intense feeling. But I think also what you're saying, which I think is so important for museums, is to use the art as a starting point for conversations. No, like to think about museums as places where you come and have the space and the time to think together or share together what you kind of experienced. I think it's very important, especially in our time, to kind of build, to kind of try to understand that to take that time and give that time, you know, as an institution is very important.
Yeah,
so
I mean, because I see the time running, and I just would like to add something. I think, yes, the museum, but also the art as this virtual space that we create. Because sometimes, and I leave you with this question, particularly when we work on political art, very engaged, the museum and the institution has this capacity to fictionalize, particularly when you criticize a crime committed by the police, for instance, the institution has this capacity to contribute to the fiction of the way the artwork, I mean, of the crime that the artwork is criticizing. But it's good. It's not. It's just a space where we can also elaborate new question, new way to live together, new flexible time where we can meet with people we are not expected to meet outside the. But I don't think that it's necessarily an architecture of the museum. I think it can be outside. It can be a non-profit space. It can be. I think we need all these different spaces. We cannot have only massive, big museum. I think La Colonie was very important for that, because it was a place, I mean, just many directors and curators from museum were coming also at La Colonie in our conversations. Because small spaces have this capacity to react very quickly to the news. But big institution, no, because it's bigger and it's slower. And I do believe in the energy of alternative space and like La Colonie.
And I think also the bigger spaces should grow out of these smaller. I mean, there is this. You need a continuation, and as you say, this variety of places where you can share the thinking and the complexity of it. Well, I think thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to our audience, and please join me to thank Kader Attia. Thank you.